All right, so I think we are recording. So actually, Andre, why don't you just make a quick intro if you haven't yet? And then we'll have all the scholars who are already logged in make a quick introduction. You can just tell us your name, what you are studying, what year you are in, and maybe where you currently live, what city. Okay, so Andre, why don't you open up our conference?
Okay, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties here.
Oh, yes, he is.
Didn't catch everything you said, so
okay, that's all right. It's okay. Let's see. I'm just gonna go in order. So, Xiaobing, will you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. My name is Xiaobing He Xiaobing. Okay, and I am studying in Beihang University, and this is my first year of my master, and I am studying robotics. Yeah. Thank you to Mittal.
All right, Yuan, you're next.
Hello everyone. My name is Zhao Yuanyuan, and I study in Shanghai Jiao Tong University this year, and it's my first year of my grad study. Now I'm studying in particle image velocity. That's all.
Okay, and Yanxia, I see you.
Hello everyone. My name is Feng Yanxia, and I am a junior. My university is Nanjing University, and I am studying in chemical materials. And thank you. That's all.
Great. Yanxia actually just came back from the States, so she did a summer program taking classes at Berkeley. So she was just up the street from where I'm. All right,
that's awesome.
And then let's see, Weilin, I think you are the fourth. So.
Hello everyone, my name is Weilin. I'm from Beijing Normal University. I'm studying bioscience, and I will graduate in 2019. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think, Andre, did you introduce yourself earlier to Eden? I know you've been coordinating this call, but why don't you give a quick intro as well about your background? Andre, can you hear me? Okay.
I'm here to call me. Okay, so originally from Brazil, lived in Canada, US, Taiwan, and now I'm in Malaysia. I've been here for a year, working as kind of like a software project manager. And yeah, I guess that's it.
All right, awesome. So with that, Eden, we will hand you the microphone, and thank you for taking the time. And you and I met, I think it was like years ago, and it's been great to, number one, meet you in person, number two, see how your career has sort of unfolded from being an undergrad student to what you did with your own company, then, working in various roles outside of that as well, and taking sort of an unconventional approach to your area of studies and your career. And then also one thing that I definitely want to get into later is your very disciplined goal setting for yourself, which I've already mentioned to all the scholars, and I sent them your personal website with that sublink to your life goals. So yeah, let me just hand it over to you, and you can also share screens if you have the presentation. It's the big green button on the bottom of the screen. All right.
Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time to come and learn about me and I guess some of the lessons that I accumulated over time. So my name is Eden, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about how my career started, how I scaled a nonprofit organization. I'm going to talk a little bit about my sort of path, how I started at university, and then took leave in order to work on this project. And I've got a little bit of presentation about the actual nonprofit, but happy to also talk in more specifics about the decisions that I made along the way and how I currently work as a product manager at a medical device company while also running my nonprofit on the side. So basically, oh wait, let me share my screen first. Can you guys see my screen? Was that a thumbs up? I think I missed that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Great. So the nonprofit that I started is called SunSaluter, and our goal is to deploy a solar panel tracking technology that helps optimize the energy collection of solar panels in the developing world. I'll go into detail and show more photos about what this actually looks like, but my journey into solar and science and engineering started when I was really young. So this is a photo of me when I was 10 years old. I was born and raised in Calgary, Canada. My parents are ethnically Chinese. I can speak very, very little Chinese. I can say my name. My name is Fu Fangying, but that's like literally it. My Chinese is so bad. But I grew up in a pretty like normal middle class household where my parents encouraged me and told me that whatever I was interested in, whether it was science or engineering or reading a lot of books, or whatever it is I wanted to do, as long as it was like an academic pursuit or music related, I could just do it. And for me, this naturally, I was drawn towards anything engineering related because I liked being able to create things. And for me, when I remember the first time that I was exposed to solar, I had gone to a bookstore and I actually, found this book and this kit that would teach you how to build a solar powered toy car. And I asked my mom to get me that. And, she, after an elaborate explanation of why this was good for my education, she bought this, she agreed to buy me this kit. And so I built these experiments where I would, play with how, exposure of the solar panel at different angles or, to different brightnesses would vary the speed or the performance of this toy car. And I had a chance to actually exhibit, these research findings. I was like 10, so it was not very significant in terms of research findings, but I had a chance to showcase these results of my experiment at a science fair. And so that was when I really realized that I like winning. I like winning at science fairs. I like experimenting. And most importantly, though, I like the fact that I can create something that's my own idea. This was my own question that I wanted to solve. And, I could then share it with other people and share it with the world. And I thought that was really cool. So over the years, I did lots of different science fair projects. And this was a science fair project that I did when I was a little older. I think this was like my 11th or 12th year of school, so about to enter university. And, some of these experiments got more and more complicated. But one common theme that I noticed in, researching solar energy was that solar panels are not very efficient. Even today, like, the very widely available solar panels that you get when you buy them at the store are really only like 15 or 20% efficient, meaning they can only convert that amount of, energy that they receive from the sun, into actual electricity that can be harnessed. And I felt like this was really silly. Some of it is due to material limitations, and I'm sure some of you are studying, ways to improve solar energy in your research in graduate school and in undergraduate programs. But, what's available on the market today are solar panels that really are not very efficient at all. And so in sort of exploring what are the different ways that you can make solar energy more effective, what I realized was if you just face the solar panel towards the sun, it'll like produce more electricity. And this obviously, I think now, you know, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. People have created these technologies where you can use an electrical motor and you will actually be able to follow the sun by, you know, gradually rotating it throughout the day so that it'll follow the sun as the sun moves across the sky from east to west. So I wondered, what if there was a very low-cost way I could do that without using motors? I wanted to see partly as a personal experiment. So I designed this very, you know, what now kind of looks to be, you know, unintuitive and complex contraption using syringes for hydraulics and, you know, metals that would expand and contract in order to cause the solar panel to tilt and rotate gradually throughout the day. And this was like an experiment and a device that I built by just going to the hardware store with my dad and just buying some things and putting it together in my home, in my basement. But, you know, this really sparked something in me where, you know, I realized that when I went to exhibit this device that I built at the science fair, someone asked me, do you realize that this is something that maybe people in the developing world could use? And I realized I hadn't thought about that before. You know, I was so focused on my own intellectual curiosity that I never thought about how solar panels were used in other parts of the world. But the more and more research I did, the more that I realized this was something I was interested in. And so here's a very blurry picture that I took, but it shows to you the difference between a solar panel that is fixed at one position only versus a solar panel that is gradually moving throughout the day. You can get anywhere between 30 to 40% more electricity. And especially in places where they lack access to a lot of energy or resources, if you just have one solar panel, you probably want to get as much juice out of that solar panel as you can get. So I had a chance to work on this technology more and more, and I realized that I wanted to try and test it out in some of these developing countries. So in grade 12, in my last year of high school, you know, I applied to different universities around the world, mostly in Canada and the US. And you know, the topic of my essay was about this research that I wanted to do and continue to do in college. So in my first year of university, I was accepted to Princeton University. You know, I had a chance to meet a professor who was teaching a class on engineering and how engineering can be used for social change. And you know, I told him about my work, and he said, "Oh, this is really cool. I'd love for you to start doing an internship part-time in my lab during the school year." So I would help him on, you know, different kinds of research where we would explore technologies related to, you know, different materials that could be implemented in the developing world. You know, for example, what you're seeing in that picture there is a solar. It's a revised solar panel tracking system. But what you don't see in that picture is it could be attached to a refrigerator that could contain vaccines, so that people would be able to store medicines and carry them on camels throughout the developing world in order to distribute them to people. And so I did research related to, you know, these solar refrigeration units, and the same topic kept coming up of solar panels are not efficient enough. They could be generating more electricity, but they aren't. And so I realized that this was a topic I wanted to tackle further. And I asked my professor, you know, can I continue to do this research on this project I had started? And would you be able to sponsor me and let me go to Kenya to deploy this for the first time? And so, you know, he agreed to this. He agreed that if I continued to do his research, he would be happy to support my research part-time, and I could, you know, kind of do both. And so during the summer, my summer internship was spent working on his stuff as well as my own stuff. And and I would do research. And then I believe for the last month or so, I actually had a chance to travel to Kenya by myself. And this was the first time I'd ever been out of North America. My parents were horrified. They were so concerned about safety, and no one is going to be there to pick me up at the airport. I had to like find a translator that my professor recommended. And there were all of these things like, getting a visa and all of the things that for the first time, when you're 17, 18 years old, you have no idea how to do. But it was a really, interesting life experience for me personally, and as well professionally. I got to see a completely different culture for the first time. And so this screen is pitch black to illustrate the fact that when I got to some of these villages, it was pitch black at night. And I had I was born and raised in like a fairly urban environment, a city of 1 million people called Calgary. I had never really been camping or anything like that. So for me to, go from living in an urban area to seeing what it's like to be in a pitch black, environment for the first time, it was really startling. And I remember that when I was in this village, I was visiting, I interviewed people in the village, and then, I was friends with a woman named Martha, and, she had told me about her, her life and how she had these 3 solar lanterns that she used. And, she showed me that, this solar panel would only charge 2 of her lanterns, and she could never have enough electricity to charge the 3rd one. And so for me, I thought, oh, this is something that could use a SunSaluter. I think I should build a SunSaluter. So I went to a hardware store back in town, and, I procured materials with the support of a translator, and I wanted to build her a SunSaluter, which was the technology that I developed. But before I had a chance to do that, I remember returning, and someone had told me that Martha was trampled by a buffalo because she couldn't see in the dark. And I think, for me, I was 18 at the time, and I had never had this kind of experience before. And it was just horrifying to me that, someone was affected and lost their life because they didn't have electricity. They couldn't be safe, and they couldn't protect themselves. And that was when it made me realize that the work that I could be doing here is not just a research project. It's not just something I'm doing for fun, for myself, for intellectual curiosity. This is something that could really change people's lives, and it's something that I want to take seriously. So I decided I would keep doing the work with the SunSaluter. I would deploy the unit. I would work with other Martha's family. I would, keep doing interviews and learning as much as I could learn, and see if I could add value to this community. So I successfully, here's the very first deployment of a SunSaluter. It was a very stressful experience. I think we all look pretty pleased in this picture, but it took a while to procure all the materials. People couldn't understand me. There were translation issues. And even ultimately, at the very end of the day, the core issue was, Eden, this complicated device that you've developed with these expanding metals, it doesn't make sense. It cannot be used in the developing world because it's too complicated. What will we do if someone broke the system and they didn't know how to fix it? What if we can't afford the materials? There were things like monkeys, wild monkeys in the village, and they will break things, or children will be curious and they'll break things. And as someone who had designed this, I designed this project and this mechanism in the isolation of a research laboratory and my own basement, I didn't have to deal with monkeys or children or, wind conditions. And it really brought to attention for me just how different research is from the real world. And it made me realize I have a lot to learn from these people. And I want to continue to develop a design that is applicable to them and is something that they can use. And not only that, but they feel like they were part of the design process, and I'm not just coming here and forcing them to use something they don't want to use, and imposing something that is not sensitive to their social and cultural needs. But Kenya is a great place to test solar. My professor sent me here because Kenya is right on the equator. So it means you get really good sunlight consistently year-round. You don't have to worry about the changing of the seasons and how that affects your solar panel performance, because it's fairly predictable. It basically moves straight across the sky, east to west. So I wanted to continue to do more research in Kenya, since I knew that would be a good place before moving into other areas.
I've been to that sign too, by the way, Eden.
Sorry?
I've been to that sign as well. It's in
it's a classic.
Famous.
Yeah. Totally recommend going to Nanyuki if any of you have a chance. Happy to also provide recommendations and suggestions offline, so let me know. But yeah, so after being in these communities, one very common behavior that I saw was that a lot of these people would actually, gather water in these jerry cans. They'd wake up at 5, 6 in the morning, they'd gather water in these jerry cans, and then they'd bring it back into their houses, into their huts, and they would just sit in their homes the whole day. So what I thought, if instead of using this complicated expanding metal design for SunSaluter, why don't I try and use water in the SunSaluter instead? You can't go wrong with water. Everyone has water, and it's something that they can intuitively understand. And it will allow me to create a weight imbalance for the solar panel the same way those metals would. And I'll explain more about the specifics of the design in a little bit. But what I really realized I hit on was this fact that the same people who lack access to electricity are also likely the same people who lack access to clean water. And so maybe I can find a way to connect these two issues together and create a solution that could tackle both of them. And so many people are spending money on kerosene in order to cook at night, or to be able to see at night, to be able to study and do their homework. There's people who walk into towns in order to charge their cell phones, and there's just this issue where even if they do have solar panels in their village, the solar panels are missing 40% of the electricity that they could be collecting. And so I realized that this is a global issue. It's not just in Kenya, it's something that affects other parts of the world too. And existing solar panel tracking systems are just not very useful here. I mentioned that there are these electrical motors that have been created to, in very, for to 0.1% of a degree or whatever, that, you could track the sun super accurately. And this would allow you to perfectly be directed and perpendicular to the sun at all times. But that's not really an accessible technology to most people. It also costs, $600, probably a little cheaper now, but it's just not in some of these places where you have dust everywhere, things break down and it's dirty and there's mud and high winds. Existing solar trackers that use active electronics are not good enough. And so what I developed is this technology called the SunSaluter, where just by simply having water on one side of the solar panel and some sort of weight on the other side, we can gradually lessen the amount of water that's on one side, and that'll just make the solar panel rotate. And so when you do that, you can have a really low-cost way that mimics the movement of an active motor, but costs way less and is a lot simpler, and you can use existing local materials, whether it's scrap metal or wood or bamboo, in order to assemble the system. And because it's so intuitive, one side is heavier than the other, and you just have to control the flow rate of water, this is something that anyone, whether or not you have technical knowledge or you have, some sort of education, you'd be able to understand how to use this. And so over the years, we've deployed a number of SunSaluters in different parts of the world. Some systems are larger than others. Some systems use water filtration units where you can simultaneously filter water as it drips out of the out of the jerry can, and that will so as that water weight is lessening, it'll rotate the solar panel and filter your water at the same time. And so different iterations of the product have been used by different people over the years, and we've spent a lot of time really trying to optimize this locally. And the data really does show that people are getting more electricity, and a significant amount more of electricity, especially in the early morning and especially in the evenings when they do use a SunSaluter. And because there are these water issues in so many of these places, by combining a water filter with the SunSaluter, we can help to reduce the prevalence of waterborne diseases. And so how the SunSaluter design works is you collect 4 liters of water, sometimes more, sometimes less, in the morning. You fill up these pop bottles, and then you attach the water onto the SunSaluter on one side of the solar panel. And then on the other side of the solar panel, you can have a counterweight. And so if you have a counterweight that's roughly half of the weight of the water, you'll be able to calibrate a system that will rotate the solar panel through its full path through the entire day. And when you adjust the water flow, you can change how much water is dripping out of the pop bottles. And we recommend, roughly 1 drop every 15 seconds. And that will allow the water to change the weight slowly enough throughout the entire day. And so the water will flow into a water filtration system underneath that's separate from the solar panel, and it'll get filtered. And as that water gets filtered, people throughout the day can use that to continue cooking and cleaning and drinking, so that it's not disrupting any part of their lifestyle. And so as the sun is moving from east to west throughout the day, the SunSaluter will rotate the solar panel in the same way as you would get with a normal tracker. And then, ta-da, at the end of the day, 40% more power and at least 4 liters of clean water are produced. And, they get clean water almost kind of as a byproduct, unintentionally. And we're able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because really they came for the electricity and now they also get the water as well. And so over the years, I've worked on SunSaluter, since 2010 officially. But, it was a research project that really did start in, 2007, 2008. And, I realized that I came up with the idea, but really I don't understand enough about people in other countries and the way they live and the dialects they speak and the cultural values that they have, in order to really ensure that SunSaluter is a technology that can be scaled in their community. So I decided that it would make sense to actually create a nonprofit organization globally that would allow us to share this knowledge and technology with others by partnering with nonprofits around the world. This is a photo that you can see of our team in India. We set up a presence of a team in India because we realized that, the Indian government has actually committed to, electrifying and using solar panels, the entire country by, I think it was the year like 2025 or something. But because there's such a growth of solar in India, we decided that it would make sense to deploy many, many units in India in order to support this government's initiative and leverage some of the resources that they have there. But this was entirely a group effort. The people who now work on SunSaluter are really the ones who are doing it full time. When I started doing this, I worked on it as part of a research project at school. After my second year of university, I was able to receive a fellowship to actually leave university and work on SunSaluter full time. So everything that you see here is the result of 1 to 2 years of really consistent full-time work, and that meant prototyping, trying new ideas, filing for patents, incorporating a nonprofit, filing the paperwork, and, you know, really sitting in front of my computer, emailing mentors. And, you know, Yin is one of those mentors that I met when I was living in San Francisco. You know, I'm really lucky that, you know, we crossed paths, because, you know, I think we're now friends to this day. But it was her and a lot of really supportive people when I was just starting out and had moved to the Bay Area and was, you know, traveling and trying to understand, you know, what was this project? What was SunSaluter? What did I want from SunSaluter? Did I want it to be a business? Did I want it to be a nonprofit? And like all of these questions that I was asking, and it really helped to actually talk to people and understand, you know, what their recommendations were based on their career path and, you know, the decisions that they made for their own businesses or their own jobs. And so through the years, we've managed to scale SunSaluter to a lot of different countries. And this is because, you know, I've managed to you know, work with the right people in a lot of these places. And some of them I've ended up hiring as full-time staff because they're amazing and they really believe in spreading energy and water into many of these communities. And some people are partnering with us as nonprofits for, you know, one-off projects. And, you know, some of these deployments are, you know, someone has like an off-grid campground and they'd like to electrify their campground with a SunSaluter. So there's different people who use SunSaluter's technology for different things. But I realized at the end of the day that what I care about is sharing this idea with other people. And it kind of goes back to the original theme of, you know, what really excited me about engineering was that I could take an idea and an answer to a question that I had found, and I could share that with people, and other people would appreciate it and, you know, use it in their own way. And now, you know, SunSaluter is an organization that is not just about me, and it's not just my idea anymore. The design has changed so much throughout the years that you know, it really, you know, was, you know, the collective effort of just many hundreds of people around the world who've contributed. And so after spending so much time on SunSaluter, it made me realize that, you know, I don't want to be doing just SunSaluter for my entire life. I feel that the skills that I developed working on SunSaluter, you know, developing a product, engineering, figuring out what users want, what customers want, finding a good way to work with other organizations and create partnerships. All of these are like valuable skills that I could apply to a different industry. I could apply at a different company. And, you know, for my entire life up to this point, I had been my own boss. I'd never learned how to work for someone else. I didn't know how to deal with workplace politics. I didn't know how to do things that I didn't want to do because someone told me to do it. And I realized that those were all important skills that I wanted to learn too. And I was finally at a point now where SunSaluter is in a whole bunch of places. We have full-time staff. I don't really feel like I'm needed anymore. And so I made the decision to serve on our board and continue to serve on our board as a volunteer while handing over the reins of CEO to one of our team members in India, who continues to run SunSaluter every day. And so, you know, I realized that because I studied engineering in university, although I didn't graduate, you know, a lot of the skills that I learned, you know, creating products, prototyping, you know, like I mentioned, like working with users, I'd like to see if I can do that with software. So I ended up working at a company called Palantir Technologies, you know, for 2 years as a product manager, where I would go to different sites, kind of like consulting, and actually deploy their software and customize it for, you know, users in a variety of industries, whether it was, you know, energy or healthcare insurance or government. You know, Palantir was deploying this software in a whole bunch of different places. And eventually I realized that, you know, after dealing with that, I wanted to learn more about how to iterate and do that with other products as well. And so currently I work as a product manager at a company called Butterfly Network. And we deploy we're actually looking to deploy portable ultrasound devices in hospitals. And Unfortunately, I can't show you a picture of the device just yet because we're still trying to get it cleared by the FDA, but I think we're actually very close to clearance by the FDA. And if you can imagine an ultrasound machine where you have like a probe that normally it's hooked up to like a giant cart in a hospital, but instead of having this probe that's hooked up to a giant cart, we've now developed a system where you can hook up a probe to your phone, and then you can scan people, using your phone, and see the images on your phone, and then, share them and share patient data and collaborate with other doctors and stuff. And, this is a product that, they needed a product manager. They needed someone who is experienced with, deploying in different countries, deploying in different user groups. And, this is a technology that could also be used in the developing world. So they, recruited me because of the skills that I had developing things for SunSaluter and developing things for Palantir. And, I decided that it would be a really good transition for my career. So that's what I do now. And, SunSaluter is still operating to this day. And, I'm really grateful for the people who've put in, this all of this energy and effort and innovation throughout the years. And I really do believe that as long as there are places in the world that need access to solar and SunSaluters are cheaper than just buying more solar panels, it'll make sense to keep using SunSaluters. Fortunately, a lot of these places, are fewer and far in between because, solar is getting cheaper and cheaper, and it's easier and easier to manufacture it. So I do see a point where the SunSaluter technology becomes irrelevant or obsolete. And that is going to be a really happy day because I think we'll have realized that technology is at a point where basically energy is accessible to everyone. But until then, I really do believe that, SunSaluter can continue to add value. And not only that, but the skills that I've developed building this organization and, the skills that I'm going to develop at other roles at other companies, I want to continue to do this for my entire life, is using engineering and using product management in a way that creates new things that are going to help people. And, for me, I realized that, that exists out in the real world and not in like a research environment, not deploying software that, helps big companies, but I want to be out there, working on real products. But it took trial and error and me figuring out that for myself to really navigate some of these big questions in my career. But, happy to also now have a conversation with you guys about your careers and what you're thinking of, and feel free to ask me any questions, but here's my email address as well. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and yeah, thanks for hearing about my presentation.
Okay. Well, Eden, I can tell you've done a lot of speaking about your own career and about SunSaluter. So thank you for sharing a very well-rounded and complete picture of the very beginnings of your scientific career to, your thinking about the future. And I think it's very admirable that that you, as the founder and former CEO of SunSaluter, can say that it'll be a good day for people around the world when, the cost of technology goes down so much to make the technology that you invented obsolete. So I think we need more people like you who have that type of mentality towards the application of technology to help people around the world. So I know there are a lot of future scientists, in our call right now. Does anyone have a question, or maybe while you think about what you want to ask Eden, and you should have many things you want to ask her, I wanted to ask you, Eden, to share a little bit about your story sort of from childhood on. Like, how did you fund these science experiments? Because not everyone has access to materials, to mentors, to knowledge around them. And so, yeah, how did you go about also financing your own education? I know you kind of went to Princeton, and then you dropped out, and then you came back, and then you dropped back out. And so talk a little bit about the sort of money aspect of it.
Right. So, you know, like I mentioned, I had a pretty normal middle class upbringing. So already I acknowledge the privilege that I had at the beginning. But you know, that my parents were not wealthy by any means. My mom and dad were both born in Vietnam, but were ethnically Chinese. And they actually came to Canada as refugees, you know, after the fall of Saigon in, I think, 69 or something, 1969. And so they came to Canada with nothing. And my mom was maybe like 13, you know, my dad was, they didn't know each other. They met when they were in Canada. And I remember, you know, my mom telling me stories of how, you know, she went to high school and didn't speak English and learned. And so, you know, throughout my childhood, I was told these stories of how difficult it was and how everything has to be earned. You know, even like I mentioned, like me wanting to buy a solar powered car kit, like from the bookstore, like my mom needed me to give a good explanation. I had to justify it. When I got good grades, I would be rewarded with, you know, $1, $2. And like, so I kind of learned this mentality from when I was young. And actually that was how I saved up to do all this stuff, where, you know, my parents were like, if you get 100 on a test, we'll give you $2, and you collect a whole bunch of $2, then you can go to the hardware store and buy materials to prototype. But, you know, I also acknowledge that I'm lucky that this was something that my parents could afford to teach me this, that we did have money lying around that they could instill these values in me. And, you know, so like, growing up, I really felt, you know, like I did work and earn, you know, every one of these prototypes, you know, that I built from hand. And so I'm very lucky to have that. But, you know, they were also very upfront with me that they had no money for me to go to university. And so I would have to do that myself, either by taking out, you know, student loans, which everybody does, or getting scholarships. So, you know, even like in grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, you know, I got into this habit of going on Google and just applying for, you know, typing in like young scientist engineering student scholarship, probably how you guys found this scholarship, just like whatever scholarship I could apply for. I just realized it's about volume, right? It's about just, you apply for like hundreds of these scholarships, and sometimes you can like copy paste the same essay. Sorry, I don't know if anyone did that here, but and you can like develop a system for doing this, and it's really just a numbers game. So I got into this habit of applying for scholarships and, you know, writing about SunSaluter and writing about this solar research project. And because it was a unique and interesting enough idea, I ended up, you know, receiving some of the scholarships. Although I think one time when I crunched the numbers, I only won about 10% of the scholarships I ever applied for. But because I applied for hundreds of them, you know, you stop feeling emotionally attached. And like, I used to get sad when I got all these rejection letters. And I realized after a certain point that like, you know, you're just going to get rejected from like everything, whether it's jobs or scholarships or universities or, you know, prestigious programs. And, you know, so that was like a good lesson for me to learn early on, was that like, you know, rejection is totally normal. And, you know, this was coming from an upbringing where like perfection is important. My mom wanted me to get hundreds on things. And, you know, when I played the violin, like the music I played had to be perfect at the concert. And like, you know, I think it took me sort of going out and trying this myself to really realize that, oh, it's okay. You don't have to win everything. And, you know, I like winning a lot. So it was a good lesson for me to learn. But yeah, I was lucky to get enough scholarships, and Princeton is very generous with their financial aid. And so, you know, based on the like tax return that you submit of how much money your parents make, they will give you a scholarship that's, you know, proportional to how much they think you're able to afford. So I never had to take out any student loans, and it was because, you know, I was very lucky to be admitted by these institutions and get these scholarships. But it was not easy, and I applied and got rejected from a lot of things, and there were lots of late nights, writing essays and submitting applications. And I'm sure all of us have had that experience to some degree. But I'm privileged that I had access to resources to be able to learn how to do this. But yeah, I think it really instilled in me from a young age the importance of working really, really hard. And it had nothing to do with me being smart. I'm not a very good writer. And I realized that the best way to make sure that my essay was good enough for these scholarship applications is to write it early and then get all of my friends who were really good at writing to edit it for me. And that was the sort of thing that, as I realized, was you have to iterate. And it's the same thing with engineering. The very first SunSaluter design didn't work, but you try again and you make changes and you make changes. And then at the very end of the day, the final product looks really good. But then people only see the final product. They don't see how hard you work to get there. And I think that's, even today, like when I tell people about SunSaluter, like I want them to know that it was really hard. And I've been doing this for almost 10 years of my life. And it's not like I just rolled out of bed one morning and decided to start a nonprofit. It was a long journey, but I'm really grateful for all the challenges. And I think, financially, I've managed to make it work, and I've been privileged in that way. But I do feel like I had to learn how to earn it.
Okay, as I'm typing up the notes and trying to keep up with you.
Oh, sorry.
All this knowledge. No. That's not your issue at all. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing that background. I think I kind of vaguely remember that your parents were not, engineers themselves, and hence sort of put you onto their track. So I think I wanted really for you to share that background, because all of our scholars are also first generation college students whose parents are not engineers or scientists, and hence they are the first ones, So look, ladies, like Eden has a similar type of background. You could be like her in the very future. She's not that much older than you. So, okay, so let me open it up for Yanxia and Jiali and Yuanyuan and Xiaobing, and I think we had somebody else weigh in to ask questions. And I'm sure Andre and Fan, our two other board members, are also, curious about certain other aspects. I still have a few other questions, but I'll save that for later. So, scholars, unmute yourself and ask questions. This is your chance. Don't be shy.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
SunSaluter, hello. I have a question. You say you have the first time you invented.
We lost you.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I don't think I heard the last bit of that question.
Kelly, you disappeared.
And then have the following story about the product, but someone like me, we have a big dream. The first that we want devoting ourselves to just like non-profit organization, but we have no any idea that how we can do it. So I think it is very different with you. So how can we do it?
Okay.
Yeah, that is my question.
Okay, I think, Jiali, we lost you for a little bit, but I think we caught the very beginning and the end. And I believe her question was around, thinking about building technology, but then building a nonprofit. And I think that's not the first that's not the first conclusion most engineers would draw, right? How to build a nonprofit. So how did you kind of go about thinking about making it for profit versus nonprofit?
Yeah, great question.
Right, I want to make sure. Okay, great.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think when I first came up with SunSaluter, I wasn't intending for it to be a business or a nonprofit. I just wanted it to be my own idea, and I wanted to, experiment. But I realized, when I guess like when I started talking about it with people, people were like, "Oh, have you thought about making this a business? It's a new idea. I've never heard about it before. You should file a patent, or you should create a website, or you should, publish in a magazine, or you should do things like that." And, the reason I got all these different ideas was because I talked to mentors about it. I came to them being like, "Hi, I'm interested in this thing, this solar thing. I made this device that I think rotates solar panels. What do you think I should do with it?" And, I got all these different answers, and there's no one right answer. But what I realized is I don't have to make any of these decisions myself. If I can crowdsource from different mentors and people and collect their advice and then try and find the things that are somewhat relevant to me, then from there I can kind of carve out a path. But however, this was where it went horribly wrong, because then people told me I should start a business. So then I spent all this time incorporating a company and filing a patent, and because everyone thinks that you should be trying to get rich, and you should be trying to sell things to people and create new technologies, and I want to be, I don't know, everyone wants to be the next Bill Gates or something, and so that's what I should be doing because that's what Bill Gates did. And so there was a bit of like, you want to collect and crowdsource people's ideas, but you don't want to follow it explicitly. And I made the mistake where I spent, 1 to 2 years, and, Ian, I think the advice you gave me has always been great, so it wasn't you. But there were definitely other mentors who told me things where I don't think I fully understood what the like rationale was behind their advice, but I just sort of blindly followed the advice. And that is something that I've realized I shouldn't do, is when someone tells you should start a business, you should understand why. Is it because it's better for financial sustainability? Is it because, it allows you to scale an organization around a technology? Is it because a business allows you to protect intellectual property? Like, what is the reason behind wanting to start a business? And, when that wasn't going so well, I realized maybe I should take a step back and actually think about, what do I want from SunSaluter? What makes me happy? And, by this time, I had done enough of these deployments that I realized what makes me happy is seeing the lives that are being changed by SunSaluter. I don't really care about the money. I don't really care about, intellectual property and protecting my ideas. I want people to use this. And after then with that, I didn't know what to do with that either. So then I went back to my mentors again, and I said, "Oh, what should I do now?" I realized that I don't want to run a business, and I explained to them why. And they were like, "Oh, well, maybe you should think about open sourcing the technology, and maybe an organizational model that makes more sense is a nonprofit, because a nonprofit is more focused on being able to deliver social value while, being able to collect grant money and donations and, pro bono services from people. And that might actually be a better fit. And, the more research that I did, and the more reading and the more talking to different people who ran nonprofits and ran businesses, and comparing the differences between nonprofit versus business, it made me realize that I think what I need to be doing in the right path is a nonprofit. But this was after like 1 to 2 years of like going down the wrong path, because everybody told me I should try and be like Bill Gates. And I don't know, I didn't think for myself. I sort of did what people told me to do. And it was not the right thing. And now I learned that, but it was good that I learned that lesson the hard way. And it took me a long time. And sometimes I feel bad that it took so long, because, all that money I spent, I could have been doing something else. I could have deployed more SunSaluters. And I kind of feel guilty about that. But then I also realize that you have to be willing to sacrifice and make some of these hard choices in order to really get to what the truth of the matter is and what you really want and what you value. So, yeah. Did that answer the question?
Jelly, what do you think? Does that answer your question?
Can't hear her.
She's trying to adjust the camera.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes.
Very thanks, Eden. If I have further question, I will email to you.
Yeah, of course.
Because my web is not that good. Yeah.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry.
Hey, Eden, so I have a question for you as well. So when you work with people from other countries like India or in Africa on SunSaluter project, so I guess that some of the people in the team that may not be on the same level as you are in terms of their idea of how to run the business, how to set up the organization, how to like streamline the processes to make the whole team work more efficiently, right? Simply because of their educational background and their culture. And then so along the process, did you feel that you have to put in the effort to like coach your team members and to like help them understand a more Western way of management so that the team can actually like make progress like, efficiently?
This is a great question, and it's something I still deal with every day. And I definitely started off feeling like I needed to be responsible solely for, enforcing like a Western, I guess, yeah, like a Western way of trying to like direct the organization. And, that means like, holding people sometimes to an unreasonable standard that doesn't make sense socially and culturally. And one example, for example, is like when I was working in Kenya, people say, let's have a meeting at 10 a.m. Sometimes in Kenya, like people have like a joke that like in Africa time, like it's very different. And it's true. Sometimes people will come to a meeting at 2 p.m. and that's totally normal. Like they don't feel bad that they're late. They don't really feel like they're late. It's just, you say 10 in the morning, but sometimes they have things to do. They have to take care of their family. They've got other things. And time is less of like this like value, like they value time and they perceive time and punctuality very differently. And I used to get so upset that like, oh, we are wasting time in the day. Like we could be doing so much more. If everybody was like me and exactly like me, like things would be perfect. But obviously like nobody is like me. And I think I spent a lot of time banging my head on the wall trying to like fix this. Like, you need to be more punctual. You need to do this. And like trying to explain to people like what I wanted them to do. But I realized, well, there were two things. Ultimately, I realized that the cultural fit in Africa wasn't that great. But there was a better culture fit in India. People were, some of our partners in India were more responsive and more eager to get started. And, the turnaround time for manufacturing was much, much faster. So, we made the decision to actually switch our headquarters for manufacturing and later for our entire operations to India from Kenya, simply because people just were easier to work with there. And then for our continued Kenya operations, I realized I don't think I'm the best person to continue like making these unreasonable, crazy demands on people. Instead, what maybe I should do is hire, local management and, with the understanding that people are going to get things done differently in some of these countries. And, I should not be holding everyone to the same Western standard, but, sort of identifying like what really matters at the end of the day. As long as we get SunSaluters out in the field, I don't care if you missed the meeting at 2 p.m. or whatever in order to do it. As long as you can deploy the unit and people are happy and it's changing lives, then, it doesn't matter what the like work style or do they remember to email me or send me or call me, like it doesn't matter. Like and I sort of removed myself from that situation, and realized that if I can find local management that I really, really trust, that will be easier for everyone, and no one will feel bad that I'm like this crazy person trying to do Western things that don't make sense. And that also means acknowledging that different people have strengths and weaknesses. So for example, for some of our team members who are not, their English skills and their writing skills are not as strong, we will trade, resources. Like they will help with the coaching of some of our other team members that need SunSaluter technical skill support. And then, in turn, some other team members who are really good at writing grants and fundraising will then, be willing to edit their essays in English and their grant applications in English, and sort of, creating like a skills trade within our organization. And so finding different ways to make sure that everyone's needs are met, without me being that crazy person trying to force decisions on people, I realized worked a lot better. But it also meant for me personally, like learning to let go of control. And I think, growing up, like I'm a very high-strung person, I guess. Everything needs to be done great. I want to be the best person in the whole world. Like I want to win at everything. And so for me, like this shifting of my attitude where that's not necessarily the right way to do things. And sort of understanding that as long as things get done, like it doesn't matter if, they were done perfectly, and they don't have to be done my way. And I think for me also, like, in terms of maturing as a leader and maturing personally and professionally, that is something I'm still actively working on. But I think I'm getting better with age, hopefully.
Thanks for the great answer to my questions. I asked the question because that actually that's related to why I was late for the meeting. I actually went to the organic film of a friend here in somewhere in the west of Hangzhou, and then so the friend is doing organic farming. She doesn't want to use any pesticide or those chemistry fertilizer. And so we went to check out a few fields, and miraculously, I remember the time of our meeting is at 9:30. I don't know how that happened because we never had a meeting at 9:30. Half of the hour always start at 9. Anyway, I shouldn't take any credit from doing this good thing to excuse myself for being late. But then, okay. So while I was talking to this friend, I realized that she really has a different mindset because she didn't have much education due to the family's financial difficulty at the time. And then so when I was talking to her, she wanted to scale up her organic farm, and she's looking for a partner. Maybe in her mind, ideally, I could be her partner. So, but we kind of talking to different things. Like she's not thinking about scaling a business in the way that by Western management would think about, right? So that's why I have the question for you. But then going back to your answer, you mentioned that by yourself, you kind of want to deliver everything perfectly, in a way. And then that's something related to your upbringing because your parents, they train you to do your best for everything you touch it. But you also mentioned that when you apply for scholarships, then normally you get rejected for a certain percentage, and that taught you to accept rejection and also kind of relax a bit this attitude of being perfect. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, and I think that's definitely, something.
I think we lost Eden. Can you guys hear Eden or just me?
Nope, she's gone. I will text her in case she doesn't realize that she dropped. Oh, wait. Yep, she dropped. Okay. I'm sure she'll dial back in soon.
Okay, then everyone, I'm going to take this opportunity while we are waiting to apologize for being late to the meeting again.
Oh, don't worry.
It's just as I said, miraculously, I thought that our meeting is scheduled at 9:30. At 9:15, I talked to my friend, oh, my meeting is going to start in 5 minutes, let's go back. So that's sometimes what can happen to mine.
It's okay. Things happen, and I think one thing to also learn is to not make such a big deal out of it if it happens.
Once it happened.
All right.
The good thing is that this meeting is recorded, so I can go back to watch her presentation.
Recorded. Now, my question is, how do we share this recording? Because it's going to be on my computer, and we need to put it onto a website where our scholars in China. Hey, there, you're back.
My internet died.
Yeah, I figured, because you just went, whoop, everything was gone. Okay, so you were
what I missed.
Just started. Fan had asked you a follow-up question, and then you had started explaining, but then you dropped immediately, pretty much. So.
Yeah, I think, the gist of what I was trying to say was that I think it's good to always identify the metrics that are being valued. Like one thing that we did with our organization was, you know, what do we actually want to do? Is it the number of people's lives that we want to change? Is it the number of solar panels that we're deploying? Is it the amount of carbon dioxide that we're reducing, or the number of kerosene lanterns that, you know, are no longer being used? Like, what are the sort of things that people value? And then if we can set goals that are related to those targets, then it doesn't really matter how you get to that target. You know, but it took a lot of dialogue and back and forth to figuring out, like, what is important to us. Like, is it number of people? And it turns out, you know, for me personally, it's number of people. But for, you know, another one of our board members, you know, she actually cares more about, you know, the number of women and children who have a chance to now go to school because they can do homework at night or something. And so there were all of these different ways that we wanted to talk about what mattered to us in the organization that allowed us to find ways to reach those goals. And so by then thinking of, you know, what's the end in sight, and how do we get there, we can then make decisions as a group that will then move us in that direction. And, you know, rather than trying to enforce, like, I want, you know, perfect grant applications being written, and we're going to, you know, have meetings every Monday that may or may not lead to an outcome, and people don't show up at meetings and things like that. And, you know, trying to run an organization in a Western way and doing a Western kind of business style, I realized that didn't work. So, you know, I just sort of left it as, here are the things that we want to achieve. So as long as we achieve these things, I don't care how you do it, and you can hire whoever you want, whatever staff you want. You know, as long as you stay within these constraints and you give us updates, then, you know, let's try that. And I realized that that sort of freer style of doing things and not being like a micromanager was actually better for the organization and made people a lot happier. And then also, when they do succeed, rewarding them by being like, great job, here's a promotion, or here is an increase in your compensation because I recognize you, or, you know, here is an award ceremony where we give you an award for being, you know, the best SunSaluter technician. But these are all different ways that, you know, people want to be recognized for their good work, and as long as you allow them to, you know, reach their goals, and that helps reach your goals, then, and give them the recognition for it, you know, I think, you know, it's a good way to work together as a team, rather than me being like, I want things done my way and this way because I'm the founder and I invented this thing and you have to listen to me because I started it. Like, I realized that that did not work very well. So.
Thanks for the great answer.
Okay, maybe I can ask my question now. I think it's really amazing that you can do what you want to do, even you are very young. And meanwhile, you can think about others. You can help others that's really in need. And that you said, you have your own project, and then you ask your mentor that if he can sponsor you. But I have a question that in China, many mentors just ask the students do what the mentor want to do. So I want to ask you that the mentor sponsored your own project. Is that because in that country, the mentor just usually sponsor what the students want to do, or you made it by a lot of efforts? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. So the professor that I was working with, I started out doing his work. I did that for about 8 months or 9 months, where I just worked for him doing his research. And, you know, I told him I had ideas of my own, but I didn't ask if I could work on those yet. But I earned his trust first. I earned his trust, and he realized that I was someone who was good to work with. I understood, you know, his research philosophy and what he valued. And then when it got to a point where we felt like we knew each other and could trust each other, you know, he sent me to Kenya, and then I was like, well, I am also, since I'm in Kenya already, can you also give me a little bit of funding and support to try this idea out? But I didn't get there right away. If I had ever, the first day I ever met him, I asked him this question, he would, no, get out, right? There are plenty of students who will just do exactly what I want. I would want to have those students instead. But it was this idea that, you know, I invested in the relationship, and what can I offer to the professor first, and build his trust and learn. And also, it was an amazing experience. By doing his research, I learned so much more about how research can be done and should be done before I tried to do my own work. And so I think it was a positive experience. And it's the same, I would say it's the same for why, you know, I have a job now and I work at a company, because I think it teaches you different ways to work with people and on ideas that are not your own. And I think that is also an important life skill, is learning how to work on things that sometimes are less interesting to you, but you have to do it anyway. And sometimes you may realize over time that it's something you didn't expect to be interested in. And I think that has actually happened to me on numerous occasions, whether it was for work or I volunteered for someone's project and I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to help them out. But actually I ended up doing it, and it was really cool. And I think, you know, that sort of open-mindedness and being willing to contribute and give to other people will then create opportunities for you that, you know, it might take a few months or maybe years to really see that return. But I think it's totally worth it. But I think it is also quite normal, you know, in any university, that the professor wants you to do their work first.
Okay, I got it.
Let me just add something to that. I just want to focus on this idea that how Eden used her network of mentors so well. She mentioned a lot of times where she would get good advice, and sometimes an advice that didn't fit her. But the important thing is when you're creating the relationships to mentors, and it's not, a mentor doesn't have to be an official capacity like a professor. It could be someone senior than you in university, or someone that graduated from our scholarship. Here in our scholarship, we have several mentors. And mentor is someone who can give you advice on anything, and it's interested in your success, in your growth as a person, as a career. So invest time in these relationships are important, and see how that turned out to be very valuable for Eden. And you guys have this network here already, but also can leverage this in other areas, seniors in university, or colleagues or alumni in your school.
I'll be your mentor, and you can be maybe. I'm sure I have something to learn from you guys too.
Oh my God, Eden, did you say you want to sign up for a mentor? Oh, we'll be recruiting them end of this year for our new batch, which we're doing in.
Sounds good. Happy to help.
Yay! Okay, this was worth all the effort of organizing this event just to have you say okay. All right, I know we only have about 8 minutes left, and Yuan Yuan had a question.
Eden, your SunSaluter is really amazing, and it's cheaper than the complex technique. So I want to know how do you find it's an issue and want to apply SunSaluter to India, and how do you find it? How do you find this issue? Maybe there are many people who are interested in solar, but they are not find this issue and want to apply this technology. That's my question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, like, I realize that I'm good at solving problems when I'm exposed to them and I'm working on them. So when I was interested in solar, the best way to learn more about solar was to do things that were related to solar. So different experiments. So then when I would go online and I would Google like solar panel experiments, or I would read papers, or I would read newspaper articles, and like the more I read, the more I realized these are the different things you can build with solar, whether it's a solar powered toy car or an off-grid system that would charge lanterns. I experimented with different things, but the most important thing was like getting an actual understanding of the problem itself by doing something and not just reading, because sometimes when you're just reading something, it doesn't really it's not as much of a visceral experience where you experience the problem. But once I actually tried to build a solution, I realized the limitations of solar, because I could see that my toy car is not does not have enough electricity. I want the toy car to go farther, but it cannot go farther because it doesn't have enough solar energy. And so, for me, like trying different things and getting, an outcome that I did not expect was how I really, stumbled upon this problem. And then when I realized, oh, this is a problem I have, I wonder how many other people also have this problem. And so I think this is something that applies not just to, solar or your engineering interests or your academic interests, but I think, if you want to think about different ideas for organizations you want to start or business ideas that you have, always the best ideas come from your own everyday life, right? Things that you experience problems with, things that you're frustrated about. And I actually keep a notebook of every time I have like a frustration or something that was annoying, I'll like make a note of it, because you never know what ideas might come out. And some ideas are terrible. Like, so for example, I remember when I was a child, I had this, I have long hair, right? When you wash your hair at night, sometimes you're too lazy to blow dry your hair. I remember I was a child, and I still have this notebook somewhere where I was a kid, where I wrote down like, I should have a pillow that will dry your hair while you sleep or something. But the point was like, I wrote down these crazy ideas anytime I thought of them, because they solved a problem in my life, and it probably means someone else has a problem too. And I think that was a silly example of like hair drying pillows, but you can apply the same concept to an engineering problem, or to research that you're doing in your field, or a business idea that you'd like to start. Maybe there's a software application or a website you always wish existed, but nobody else has created this application before. Maybe you could create it. or you could like partner with someone to create it. But like the idea of like starting to get into this mindset of you and your skills and your ideas are good enough that they could, you know, you could create the solution instead of waiting for someone else to do it. You can do it. You can be the one to come up with the idea. You know, I think that was the biggest mindset shift for me. And, you know, it doesn't have to just be like technical subjects like solar energy, really, like literally anything in your life. It's good to get into a problem solving mindset.
Yeah, I think taking a note is a good idea, and I will try it later. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. I think we have 2 more minutes left, but Xiaobing wanted to squeeze in another question. So go ahead, Xiaobing.
Last question. Hi, Eden. Yeah. What you did is really awesome. And, you know, I learned mechanical, and your mechanism is very simple, but it is powerful. It is very great. And you mentioned that that was your first time to go suburb from a very urban city, and your parents were concerned about you. But why didn't you ask a company, maybe find another person to go with you, and would it be more efficient to do the research? Were you the only person to involve the project?
So at the time, there was very limited funding for the project I was on. And, you know, part of it was, you know, there was a little bit of a physical safety issue for being the only person to go. But the way I sort of justified it was, if I can go by myself and show success from this initial project, then maybe we can get more funding and more people can come and it will be safe next time. And, you know, I think that's the way it's sort of been for a lot of the project is, you know, I was the first person to do something and get it started. But then once I was able to prove that it worked, you know, it was easier to get support. And, you know, especially for a lot of these, like applying for grants and organizations, you know, who give money and donate to these sorts of causes, you know, everyone likes to make sure that the money that they're donating is guaranteed to be successful. The best way to do that is they always only support organizations that are already succeeding, which is hard. But it meant that, you know, initially I did have to use some of my own money that I'd earned and some of my own scholarship money, as well as the stipend that my professor gave me in order to make the trip to Kenya and, you know, buy some of these materials for the SunSaluter. And yeah, it was a little unsafe and my parents were not very happy. But, you know, I felt like I needed to take the risk. And this was something that was important enough to me that, you know, I wanted to do it. And, you know, I think it was the first of many lessons where I realized that sometimes I couldn't always listen to my parents because they love me very much and they want what's best for me. But you know, they don't have the same perspective and an understanding of the situation as me. And it was very hard, and even is now still hard. You know, I didn't end up graduating from university, and my parents are still to this day somewhat heartbroken about it. But I think, you know, it's a lesson to be learned personally and professionally that, like, you can't always just do what other people want you to do. Sometimes if you think something is the right thing to do, you have to be the first person to prove that it works and to prove it's the right thing. And then maybe other people will come on board.
Okay, well, on that note, so lots of inspiration. I wrote down a lot of different things that I still wanted to ask you, Eden, and for you to talk about. But since you just signed up to be a mentor, be part of our community going forward, I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to have you speak about, I think especially on the time management. I know today we focus mainly on the engineering and the entrepreneurship part, which of course is super important. But knowing you and knowing the way you conduct your life and sort of being on, Team Eden, I'm with you on like, you got to be on time, you have to be organized, you have to plan ahead. I think those are a lot of the skills that you should start to train when you're younger, when you're still in school, because it'll be very valuable later on. And I would definitely, want the scholars to also learn about all the other things you work on, that you still study, that you set these goals for yourself, that you are involved in sports, that, just like with probably with the experiments that you run from a technical perspective, you also iterate in terms of your own hobbies and try to diversify. And so I think that's very important, and probably why, I hopefully feel like you live a very fulfilling life, not just as a scientist, as an engineer, and as a worker of a company, whether your own or someone else's. So we will leave that topic for another time. But yeah, everyone, I think the biggest takeaway is, I think there's don't listen to your parents.
No, that's not the.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So we have lots of notes to share with you, and this is being recorded, so we can share it with the rest of the scholars as well, and we will certainly remind them and recommend them to check out this talk. So thank you again for your time, Eden. I know it's late in New York.
No problem.
It's 11 p.m. already almost. So we will let you get some rest. Please say hi to Andy for me, and I will hopefully see you in New York on my next trip. And everyone else, thank you for questions. Thanks, Andre, for setting up and coordinating this call. And we will see. Actually, before we all log off, we already scheduled our next call. And I know we'll send out the reminder. Yeah, please move yourself. Before we log off, I want to just let you guys know that we've already scheduled our next call in November, and it's going to be now my calendar is going crazy, but I think it was November 20th or somewhere around there. And we're going to have our own mentor, Cynthia Young, and her wife, Vivian, speak on robotics. So Vivian is a PhD candidate about to finish her degree studying robotics. And Cynthia works for a company that makes a robot, Pepper. So she works for SoftBank's robotics department. So they will be talking about that subject. I think will be super cool, especially because Vivian is like an award-winning robotics engineer. So yeah, we'll send out more information about that, but just wanted to give you the heads up about it. Okay. All right.
That
Anything
sounds cool.
else?
I want to be in.
Oh, we will. I'll put you up on the list right away.
Awesome.
All right, and Andre, did you have any closing words for us, since you're we're the host, but I took over because you have bad internet connection?
I think this is amazing. Thanks, Eden, for all. I have many questions that I'll probably just email you separately so I can put in our notes as well. Thank you, everyone. And this was, I think this guest speaker series we're doing seems to be working pretty well, pretty informative. So hopefully we can do more in the future.
Yeah,
and fun, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, Andre, because I was late for the meeting, I didn't know if at the beginning of the meeting you already asked the group if anyone can help hosting information session in their campus.
Oh, we haven't asked about that yet.
Okay, so among this group, like Jiali and Yanxia already contacted me that they're going to help with hosting information session in Nanjing University. So for Beijing Normal University, Beihang University, so wonder if Weilin and Xiaobing, you can consider it, and then later contact me and see if you can help with organizing the information session, because for these two universities, we don't have that many representatives. Okay.
Yeah, I think I can organize the information session in Beijing Normal University, because before I have a lot of experiments, but now I think I can make some time for the session.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night, and Eden, and have a great rest of your Sunday, everyone else in Asia.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.